This morning we welcome Rian Labuschagne as our guest speaker, and we thank him, and as well as all our other partners, for sharing their experience with us. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to hand over to Rian to start sharing and hand over the floor to him. I see that there are people still coming in, but I think we should start the proceedings as we've already been in for 10 minutes.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Rian Labuschagne. I'm speaking this morning here from out of Tanzania, Serengeti. I'm very happy to be here and very honored and privileged to be part of this whole initiative. We would like to today just look at security and communities. It's a topic that one can talk a lot about, but I would just like to go through the different places where I was involved over the last 30 years or so, and in what capacity. It will give you a better background what we could do in different places, and how could we engage with communities in these different scenarios. We were very privileged and very to be able to work in these wonderful places in 4 different countries. And I'll just quickly run through it, and with the main challenges, the main threats of each area and the setup there. Okay, I'm going to run through quickly over the last 30-odd years where we've worked under what model. And as I said, today it's all about, how you combine communities to achieve your goals in conservation. We started off in South Africa, Kalahari, Kruger National Park, as a section ranger. We're a government employee. At that time, our big challenges was a bit of, or the big main threats was low elephant poaching, snaring, local hunting. In the Kruger National Park at that time, a lot of issues with the war going on in Mozambique, and people going from Mozambique to South Africa, crossing the national park. The challenges was, for me at that time, sharing a conservation area international boundary, very difficult. Sharing it with military units also working next to you. Later on, the situation came up again and we avoided it. And then also I experienced there the first big black rhino poaching incident that happened from within us. We spent 5 years there. We were then moved up to Malawi, Liwonde National Park, where we were seconded to the Malawi government by the South African government and worked as a development officer. Big difference there, we had our own budget. So we had leverage in the park. We could do things, but we worked next to parallel with the chief park warden, a Malawian, that had his own team, and we helped him with developing certain issues, infrastructure and so on. So you had to go in, and it's very important, with the right attitude, with the right vision, working together as a team. It forced you to go in with a good attitude. Otherwise you achieve nothing there. The main threats there also elephant poaching, fish poaching, wire snaring, and a huge demand on natural resources from local communities. The challenges was a very hard edge boundary. We will look at it later. Big population, refugee camps around the park, floating firearms. Spent 5 years there. We then moved up to Tanzania, employed by an NGO, Frankfurt Zoological Society, a long history in Tanzania as a technical advisor, working again with a controlled budget. We had our own budget, but working within a team, a Tanzanian management team who manages Ngorongoro Conservation Area. It's a multi-land use area, now in the news a lot with the issues with the Maasai who lives in this conservation area. The main threats for us there, we were involved in a black rhino project. So it was black rhino poaching. And the challenges was a growing human population within the area with livestock, and a mistrust between authorities and the local communities. From Ngorongoro, we moved to Grumeti reserves. Also in Tanzania, on the western boundary of the Serengeti, there I was employed as a managing director for an investor that had a concession, 2 hunting blocks. We again controlled our own budget. We had much more say over management. We had much more leverage to do within rules what we wanted to do. It was hunting blocks that we slowly turned into a photographic operation. The threats there again, bushmeat poaching, using wire snares, illegal cattle grazing. The challenges there was to have an effective partnership where most of the authority lies with government, but you have most of the financial clout, how to come together and make it work. From Tanzania, we moved up to Chad, there as a park manager with African Parks. We now had full control of the operating budget and of all park staff. So we hired and fired, and we could decide what happens in there. The park was well established, no boundaries, no fences, but a lot of boundary disputes. The main threat there was a heavy elephant poaching and loss of field ranges. It was a military style onslaught mainly from Sudan. And then the main challenge was to make a public-private partnership a success, where it was the first years of that partnership, where language, culture, the isolation, lack of legal system, suspicion, widespread illegal firearms in Chad. It's a very unstable country, but how to get that, that you can do what you wanted to do in the management of that park. We today have moved back to the Serengeti, based in the Serengeti again with Frankfurt Zoological Society. Again, a very big privilege to, after many years, come back and look again in projects you started 20 years ago and see what had happened there, what went wrong, what didn't happen. In the Serengeti here again, we are support to the management. The park is managed by TANAPA, the Tanzanian authorities. Frankfurt has been involved here for over 60 years, and we play a supporting role. Some years is not much to do, but in the COVID pandemic, it happened 2 years ago when all the income dries up, then Frankfurt steps forward again, and we become again much more involved in supporting our partners. Again, the challenges, the threats here is still the rhino elephant poaching, the threats of it. It does not happen, but we're constantly aware of it. Bushmeat poaching, cattle grazing, over tourism. Serengeti is extremely popular. Been 3 times in a row the best park in Africa, voted by visitors. So they got to really manage their tourism to make sure it happens in the right way. If I look at all these places we work in and I look at what is the constant in it, then all these protected areas were well established. They've been established year ago. They're well staffed. They're well documented. Tons of research was done in them. They've got strong protection status within the government. It's all the government parks we worked in, except maybe Kruger and Grumeti, had budget shortfalls and a weak technical capability to maintain, repair, and equipment, all of that. Those 2 points, first 2 points are very important, because if the second one falls away, the park or the conservation area goes into what we call a paper park. It's still there. On the map, you see that green spot, that's the national park. The government still recognize it, but it's overrun by cattle or people because they did not have the budget. They do not have the capability to maintain roads, cars, radios. And it's something, especially in West Africa, not so much in Central East Africa, but in West Africa, there's huge areas that's lying open just because of those 2 points. In all the areas, we had big expectations from surrounding communities, jobs, resource sharing, compensation for damage by animals. It was in all these areas, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger demand. All these areas, the elephants were the big challenge. And it's really something that all the younger conservationists who's now going to have that challenge on their table in the next 10 years should pay attention to. We experience in Kruger a part of the whole culling operation that was still happened there, was part of taking thousands of elephants basically out with culling to all the different scenarios in Chad. We lived with 12 elephants basically around the house in a dry season, and you know, became totally almost emotionally involved with these animals. And it's either too many, it's either too few. The challenge of poaching, the damage, the lack of corridors, it's one of our biggest challenges for the future. Just a simple Google picture screenshot here that shows you the boundaries of Liwonde. And I just want to explain again the pressure of communities on protected areas. Liwonde is a relatively small park. And if you see there very clearly, I don't know, with the mouse, I can just outline it. You can clearly see the boundary of Liwonde National Park, how it is today. There's no, and it's today, it is fenced. They had to fence it with a big elephant population that it's managed today by African parks. They're moving elephants out because of the overpopulation, and it's a huge challenge. How do you satisfy the demand from communities on that protected area? In the time we were there, the pressure was on us to share wood, to share grass, to share grazing. And you said, okay, you allow people to cut in a bit of grass, and you find, well, they take it 3 kilometers away and they sell it. They don't use it themselves because the value of that natural resource inside. And to control it, it's a big issue how to satisfy around. The place we have is so small, it cannot satisfy, or it cannot make a difference in the youth populations around these areas. This slide, I have already talked about the different ways we were involved in these different areas, and you know, the different scenarios which in our opinion, from just a government employee to a park manager with a full budget in your hands. And if I say that full budget in that last example here, managing Zakuma National Park in partnership with the government and with a good donor, that budget that you have in hand is not the same as a budget that is provided by government, which is taxpayers' money, which is very complicated to use. If that is what we experience in all these places, you want to buy just tires for a vehicle, it can take you 3 months going through all the government procedures. In a PPP like we had in Zakuma, we had the funds. We buy it in 1 hour. We decide you need tires, you buy it, and you put it on. It makes a massive difference if you have to manage a controlled area or a national park. So the last one there is, to me, definitely, if it works, and the government, in the beginning of a PPP, as we found in Zakuma, governments are reluctant to accept it. But once they see the win-win situation, that they have no more expenses in that park, they sit on the board of managing that park, and you can, they have success in the park, they accept it fully, and from there they give you the full support. Again, just a screenshot of the Serengeti ecosystem, and to emphasize that we're in a phase, we're in a 10 years that we're drawing the last boundaries of all these big protected areas. You can see that clearly. There's no fence on the western boundary of the Serengeti here. It's just a 2-track road, but you can see how clearly and how hard that boundary is. Very difficult for all these people, thousands of people on this boundary, that has to make a living out of it. I also just want to put here about communities. To me, it's the wider community, the country. Serengeti National Park is very well known in Tanzania. The Tanzanian nation has immense pride in Serengeti, Kilimanjaro, all these parks. And that is why if there's a threat or anything on these parks, it is the nation, the bigger community that stands up. And that's what you want. And we'll come back to it again later. The local communities on your boundaries, you have to engage, but they usually part of your threat, part of your challenge to manage that area. I just want to look at three scenarios and how we engage with communities. I'm going to go just very quickly over it and just specifically look at the communities. There's many other factors that was involved there. The first one is in Ngorongoro. When we started in Ngorongoro 95, went down that we only had 12 black rhino in Ngorongoro crater. That's an area of about 250 square kilometers. So we came in as a technical advisor under Frankfurt Zoological Society, working with the authorities. At that time, the crater was managed by one vehicle, or the presence of the anti-poaching was one vehicle, two rangers reporting to one person at the headquarters at the top. And they wouldn't really allow us to be part of that. We just did the monitoring of the 12 rhinos. We did not have any access to any of the techniques and what they do there. What we did have was two Maasai trackers, local community people who worked with us, helped us with the monitoring. The person there in the front, Mzee Saleh, is a person who was Maasai, who was born in a crater, grew up there. He knew the crater, unbelievable knowledge of every corner and crook of the Ngorongoro crater. And we had the privilege that he was our tracker that we used if we go into the forest, but he was not really part of the whole anti-poaching effort there. It was just somebody that worked with us. Within the first 6 months in Ngorongoro, this female, Amina, one of the 4 producing females in the crater was missing, and the calf here was called Richard, we found on the crater floor. We were told she maybe has walked up the rim, she has disappeared, everything to try and cover it up basically. We captured the calf, put it in a safe place because the hyenas was going for it in the first 2 days. And then these 2 Maasai said, no, they will go out and look for this rhino, what has happened there. Because the 2 rangers that was there with the car, you know, it was just a big area, they couldn't find, they could do nothing. Within a few hours, these Maasai found the carcass. We were then told, no, this carcass, it just died maybe of a natural, and again tried to cover it up. But the Maasai kept on looking. Saleh, they found the cartridges, they put the whole thing together, the horn was gone, it was definitely poached. The police became involved, and all the rangers and the person involved there is Tanzania. The police take a very strong point against the rhino, luckily still, and all the people were arrested. The board of Ngorongoro came to us and said, you have a budget, we give you a free go of put something in place here that will protect these rhinos, because they've just been going down and down every year, now down to 12 in a matter of 20 years from 70 rhinos. We went back to Germany, and again, the importance of a flexible budget. Our office in Germany gave us an open check and said, put in place what you must put in place. We immediately decided that you have to put a mixture of procedures in place in the crater to be able to make it more transparent. The thing of just 2 people that has got the free go here, and they're the only people. The same happened in Kruger National Park in the 80s when one section ranger had an area that he didn't allow anyone to go in there. Eventually, when he was moved, they found, I can't remember, but it was quite a number of rhino that was poached in that time, and he just kept everybody out. The same scenario happened here in Ngorongoro, with just not allowing anybody else. In short, what we did, we take the whole ranger team that time, it was 20 rangers. We put them in two teams of 10, and we brought them down. 10 would stay 1 week in a crater. They went up in 5 teams. They had different posts that they had to man in that week. We had a hat that they draw numbers from. If you draw this number, you're in OP. If you draw that number, you're in a night patrol. We built the OP post on the crater rim. You can see here, it looks down onto the main rhino area, where 2 rangers were permanently based, again, changed every week, and nobody knows who's going to be in that OP the next week, except you know what number you pull. And from here, they had radio communication, a big telescopes that they could actually find most of the days all the rhinos from this point, direct the cars to them to identify, stop all off-road driving. We put a trailer down on the crater floor, which was moved every day. Again, every week, the 2 rangers here changed. Every week, every day, this trailer would move on the crater floor. So you could never predict where it will be. And in that, we mixed the whole system, that it's predictable. There's going to be rangers down there, but no one knew where he's going to work that week. No one knew where these trailers will appear, all the tourism drivers. It was every day for him a new surprise where to see them. And that system is today still in place. Also today, the difference is they have over 100 rangers that they have to use to protect the rhinos. There is 3-4-fold today, a big problem that many of them are walking out. Again, they never really realized the power of these are actually rangers within Ngorongoro, but these are Maasai at the age where their responsibility is to protect the community, and they move around a lot inside that community. We were fighting or arguing at that time that they should be involved in the protection of black rhino just because of their absolute knowledge of what happens in that area. We couldn't get it then, but I'm happy to say now we have a team of them, Maasai trackers, who works with the rhino teams, and when the rhinos goes out, they help to track down and know what is happening there. We moved to Sakuma, where 90% of the elephant population of 4,000 was poached out in just a very few years. Sakuma, just to show where it is in Chad, close to the Sudan border, Central African Republic. If we say close to the Sudan border, most of the poaching came from the Sudan, Darfur. We said it's about 10 days by horse to get to Sakuma. To look how it developed over the years, the poaching in Sakuma, over the last 150 years, elephant has been poached from horseback in this region. It's very skilled horsemen, long spears, bamboo spears, wide blades. They will isolate one elephant and then they have their technique. It's quite a brutal thing, but they will kill that elephant, and very successful in the way they do it. The result of these poaching by horse is that the elephants in that part of the world, the Central African Republic, Chad, and what is left in Sudan, form very tight herds. It's the only place I've ever seen it. Here's 400 elephants. You can see we're busy here with the collaring operation. They're milling around very tightly, and it's a mechanism. We spoke to a lot of people and previous hunters and managers in this area. It's a mechanism that we believe the elephants has developed with us to counter this horse poaching where individuals is being pushed out and then killed. It's a defense mechanism where they form these tight herds. Of course, when the spears is being changed for AK-47s and belt-fed machine guns, the results was these big massacres with 60 or 70 elephants at one spot being killed, never mind how many later on dies in the field. And that is what brought the elephant population in Zakuma in a very short time from 4,000 to about 400 when African Parks took over in 2011. The situation we found was a very traumatized elephant herd. African Parks then came in as a PPP to manage Zakuma for the Chadian government, good funding from the European Union, a very good combination. What we found in the first year is Zakuma in the wet season is absolutely flooded. You can hardly move around, and the previous management would move out for 4 months where they say the park couldn't be managed. In this time, the elephants scattered, and after every wet season coming back, the elephant numbers were down. So we realized we have to know what happens to the elephants, where do they go to, and decided to do a collaring operation with satellite collars. This was the first operation with 20 elephants that we did, and then very important decisions that was taken then, 2 of them with community that if I think back, if we didn't do this, I think the whole outcome of Zakuma would have been different. The person there in the middle is a local spiritual leader, is very strong, a Muslim country, Chad. He's a very important person in that area. He was very negative towards the park, claiming that his nomadic communities around has been harassed, that the park wants to take their land. But people convinced him to participate. And he was with us, with his whole spiritual team for the whole time of the elephant collaring operation. Here was one of the last ones where he blessed operation, and he blessed this elephant after we did the collaring. The other team that was with us that time was a local Chadian film team, which we didn't think much about in the beginning. They didn't look very professional, but they stayed with us the whole time. And they made a small film, about 45 minutes of the whole operation, in the way that they knew their audience, like in French, in Arabic. And they interviewed this group here at this point with the elephant. In the second year we were in Zakuma or in Chad, I think that film was shown in about 60 times on their national television. Whenever there's an open slot, they showed that film. The result was when we walk into N'Djamena in the capital into a shop, the shop owner will recognize you and he will start to talk about Zakuma, about the elephants, how's it going, what is happening there. This spiritual group, we kept contact with them from there on. Every operation we did, we invited them to come in. They came to the park on their own to come and find out what is happening, if there's anything that can help. So 2 very small actions involving communities had a long impact on what we did there, and often think what would have happened if we did not do it. We realized that if we want to stay right through the wet season in the park, we have to very quickly improve all the infrastructure. We had to build airstrips because remember, this place is very, very wet. Again, the importance of a flexible budget. We could get equipment going in a short time, flying in spares, doing what we needed to do. We put in a digital radio system immediately. We connected it up to a operation center. We could now follow the elephant and start to communicate with the teams that were out in the field. If you look what happened in that first 18 months here, you can see there the map of Zakuma, clearly about 300,000 hectares, and the green dots is the movement of the elephant. You can see here they started to move out 100 kilometers outside. Now you got to remember, we protect this park very strictly. If you put your foot in here on horseback or anything, you're a suspect. We want to arrest you. You're in the national park to protect this elephant. When the elephant leaves this park and is in those communities, now you're hat in hand with the communities and said, you know, please accept these elephants. Elephants are protected all over Chad. So by law, they cannot do anything. But you now work with communities and say, well, we have to protect these elephants and wildlife in your area. And please accept it. So again, very quickly, you realize if you don't have the buy-in or you don't have a good relationship with these communities, you will fail, because once the elephants are out there, you're on their turf, you're talking to them about what to do and where not to do it. If you get there in a wet season, as I said, it's very wet. So we realized we have to protect the elephants so far outside. As I go back to that map, you cannot get there. It's all wet. It just looks like this. So to protect the elephants into those outside areas, we realized we got to establish forward bases inside these communities, and that take a long time. We in Chad, luckily, with all the cattle routes, you can land almost anywhere. We used aircraft to visit all these communities, talk to them. They were very reluctant. They didn't like rangers in their place. They kicked their pots open. They had not a good experience in the past. But we said we will stand in, and we guarantee our rangers that comes in will be different. There's a typical Chadian village on the outskirts. Rain season, they completely cut off. They open to abuse by poachers or gangs coming from Sudan. It's not a very stable country. So they're in the hands of whoever comes through there in the wet season. We established small airstrips in all these villages to be able to get there even in the rain season. We also, none of these villages had schools. We very quickly made what we call the SECO school. We employed a teacher, built a structure. We put our whole workshop into making desks, and we established these small schools in the villages where the teacher is employed by us. We now had the ears of all these children, which we also had an environmental message, but the teacher knows everything through the children, what happens in that area. We also negotiated with the local village chief. You can see there, we put an antenna, a radio up for him. We put a digital radio in his house that is programmed that he can only speak directly to our ops room. He cannot speak to anyone else. He can only speak. Every morning, he calls in the ops room, and he has direct contact with HQ of the park to give any information. If a child saw a camel with some people they didn't know with firearms, tell the teacher, teacher tells the chief, chief tells the ops room. If we know 3 or 4 instances like that, we know there's some smoke, there's some fire there, and we will send the aeroplanes or the horse teams out to investigate. So in all these communities around, and you can see all these, I don't know if you can see that, but all the places where we had airstrips out and established contact with the community. It's a vast amount of information that came in for the communities with these rangers now in their villages, and where there's a direct contact with a chief to talk to the headquarters. So there's a control. If there's any complaint, he can talk to us. It very quickly became that villages actually asked for rangers to be posted in a village during the wet season, because it brought stability, it brought a law to the area. The airplanes could fly emergency medicine out or fly people out of there, and it created a communication with the headquarters that it was a win-win situation for both parts. This is, you must remember, just one component we're talking. We had many other components we put in place, but this one component involving communities gave us the security that we wanted for the animals when they move out. It gave us the communication channels. It gave us information what goes on there, and it made the communities partners of the operation, where it is still guns and military operations, it played now in their favor. And it was very well accepted by them. As I said, school children is the best form of information. They got a schooling. Their fathers were actually rangers in the park. So if they saw anything of a raiding party on horseback with firearms or people they don't know, very quickly they related that information to the teacher, and very quickly it came to the park headquarters and we could react. Here, just a few rangers of our reaction team. At the back, you see photographs. Those are all rangers that was killed during action in Zakuma, the time we were there in the first 6 years. The picture that is held up there was a ranger that was killed in Hebron. He was 55 years old, what we call the eco guard. He was killed, and his son there, who's holding the picture, stepped in. It's a tradition in Chad that if a ranger is killed, the family member steps in and take over that responsibility. So these rangers and the others we employed, we recruited from communities around the park. The families there knew their sons, their fathers are in the protection of the park. And they're part of it. They don't have to worry about them. But if they see anybody around there, it also affects their fathers, their sons. And it made that everybody around that park was trying to make sure that their family and their teams stay safe. We also put motorbike teams, the older guys on motorbike teams that just travel outside the park on all the different the routes that the cattle herder, the nomads use. They traveled around, slept every night in different villages. They were just a presence out there. Again, bring stability and gain information. And in many instances where cattle theft is a very big thing in that part of the country, they help the communities together with the airplanes to track down cattle and return it to the different communities. So they were very well accepted, very welcome in the communities around the park. I didn't mention it enough, but the government of Chad does not have the resources to actually police or to send people out there. So we took a little bit that role of bringing stability. All of these rangers carry a gun and is employed by the Chadian government with a small salary as a token. We pay the big salary, but they represent the government. But they now under our control. If I say our control, the management of Zakuma National Park, we put the discipline down. We can say, well, if you don't behave within the communities, you lose your job. And very quickly communities understood that they have a say in it, and now they became partners. Just in the last year there, to show what it is, the same group of nomads, Arabs, that lived around the park, called us for a meeting, and they actually donated a horse to the anti-poaching teams of Zakuma. A horse to them is a very big thing. They all lived on and around horses. They know horses intimately. So it's a very big token to take, and it was a very special horse that they handed over to the anti-poaching teams from the communities around the park, which is the same people that was involved the first year in the collaring. So just show the power of a small action, how it snowballs and eventually, changes attitudes. Just quickly go in where we're now in the Serengeti, where up to 80,000 animals were lost in the past on bushmeat poachers annually. It's a very big problem in this side part of the country in the Serengeti for years. It's wire snares made out of old tires where they cut these wires out. It's just got the right amount of flexibility and spring in that wire. It's a rusted thing that they put up very skillfully, and it's a devastating tool that if it's set up right, it kills thousands of animals. You can see here what just the containers we keep. We've removed over the last 4 years about 60,000 snares. You know, that's equivalent to 2 8-ton trucks of snares, and about 120 or 130 kilometers of snare line if you put it up every 2 meters. There are a lot of snares that was taken out there. And how we did it, again, you can see here how carefully a snare is being put up. It's almost an animal just cannot get around it. This is a typical poacher's camp where the meat is dried, packed on donkeys or bicycles and taken out of the park. It is, you know, if you get some of these bigger camps, you can just see how many animals is actually killed there. The problem we sit with, also another problem that's coming in, is local Chinese motorbikes and cell phones rush in, kill an animal, load it and out before you can do anything. Serengeti, open plains, it allows for this method of poaching. The way we approached it, again, the Tanzanian park authorities, who's in charge managing the Serengeti National Park, has a ranger force who they employ nowadays basically purely on academic levels. There's so many applications that you have to have quite a high academic level by law. The result is many rangers that we employ took the right career, but they come out of Dar es Salaam. They have very little knowledge of field knowledge. To bring that in, as you know, it takes years to train a tracker or to learn about how to walk in a up a mountain full of buffalo, elephant. So that field knowledge is missing. Also, a lack of funding. We do not have enough rangers to do the work. Most of the top rangers we use in IPZs, or the park management using IPZs around the rhino populations, which is expanding and luckily increasing. So they need more and more rangers every day here. We formed Frankfurt Zoological Society, a partnership with outside donors and with all the hotel owners of the park. Together with TANAPA, the three parts formed the MOU and said they will put the money into the account of Frankfurt. It's very complicated to give it straight to government, and the auditors don't really allow it. But the stakeholders or donors put the money in the account of Frankfurt. We go out in our community project and we start to talk to ex-poachers, people that's been involved in this wire poaching for years. And we as Frankfurt employ them on short contracts. We bring them in the park, and Frankfurt, with this money we have from the donors, buy the cars, the tents, the equipment, everything. So we fund that whole team. The only people that, the only part of this team that TANAPA, the government, has to put in is the 2 rangers. You see the guy on the left with the firearm, he represents government, he represents authority. He has the right to arrest, and he is the one, only 2 rangers now. You can add a team of 6 or 7 ex-poachers, and we employ a ranger or a group leader, usually from a retired ranger from government service. The guy on the left there, Abram, has been for years with TANAPA. We re-employed him. He's our employee from Frankfurt side. He is a team leader. The guys on the rest are ex-poachers. They've been involved in animal killing for years. You put them as a team in the field, putting these snares up, it's a business. You have to know exactly where you put it up. Otherwise, you waste your time, you catch nothing. They have that knowledge where you put it up. They have no fear in walking at night because that's how they lived. They had a very tough life, coming in, have a camp, cannot make a fire. They catch all these animals. You see how the meat runs there, lions and hyenas around them. They know how to do that. They have no problem in doing it. You now have a transfer of that bush knowledge going over to these rangers, who many of them come from towns, Zanzibar, Dar es Salaam. They get the knowledge of how these people work, what they do in the field. And that transfer of knowledge is very important. However, bigger so that knowledge of these ex-poachers to know exactly where to go to take out these snares has made a very big impact. We change them now every year, that to give more of them a chance. You don't give secrets away because they already know the park so well. They know where their fathers and their grandfathers set up snares. So you don't give any information away. And the result is that we can keep the lid on this whole snaring, as many other threats for the Serengeti as well. But this one, which is a very big one, the snaring of any animal, lions, elephants lose their trunks. It's, as I said, a devastating thing. You can keep the lid on it by using these themes. We also use aircraft. See, where's the migration? Because these poaching gangs usually follow the migration. So we give that information to the ops room, which relays it to these teams. These teams, I must just say, they function fully under the NAPA, the authority of Serengeti National Park. The only place Frankfurt comes in, we fund it and we set up the cars and we employ the ex-poachers coming from outside. The government cannot employ those people on short contracts. It's complicated for them. So we do it, and the funding comes from a donor. So it's a very powerful combination MOU that works very well. They take hundreds of animals out of snares, which they rescue throughout the year. And it's been a very successful operation using communities. The money that is raised for these operations goes direct in the hands of communities, but the benefit is to the park. Thank you very much. It's in that time, I think I went a little bit over, but that's, I think, where we go today.
Rian, thank you so much. The only problem with your talk is you set the bar very high for future speakers in this series. So we will have to work very hard at it. Fascinating talk of your career and the challenges that you faced and the innovative approach that you took to solving these problems. So we're going to now open the floor to questions for the students and everybody else that are in the audience. I would like to point out that you can use the reaction tools at the bottom of the screen to attract our attention, or you could also write your question in the chat if you don't want to present the question live. Rian, you mentioned, just to get it going this morning, you mentioned before we started the session that you prefer in your career path to every 5 or 6 years start a new challenge or move to another area. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you would do that?
Yeah, I think it differs from person to person. A lot of it was also us. We just wanted to, always go to a new area and a new adventure and so on. But we have found that in 5 years, in these sort of situations, you usually come to achieve what if you set it out and you're lucky, that you've achieved a certain part of your goal in that park, and you now start to become a little bit in a rut and you believe all your own things and you don't want to listen to other advice anymore. You think you've got it right. I think at that time it's better to step out, allow another person to come in. Usually if you've done it right, you've set a good base that somebody else can come in. The budget's already there, the relationships is there, the infrastructure is a bit there, and you bring somebody else in who can look at it at a complete different angle and who's much stronger in, I'm not very good in admin or any monitoring or stuff like that. So you get somebody in which brings that part of the project to look at where there's shortfalls or where there's gaps that they can fill it up again. But we found between 5-7 years, then we moved to a new project. And we've been lucky to also look at the people that stepped in behind us. And it's satisfying to see, you know, like in Zakuma, they've had 2 park managers since then. And the development, I mean, Zakuma has expanded in the last years. It's still going very from strength to strength. And we see how the new park managers, they take a complete different approach. I wouldn't, you know, even think, or I would argue against it. But they have another idea, and they have other ways of doing it, and it just brings a more transparent strength to the management of that area.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rian. It's you know, when there are so many people in so many different fields who build their own little kingdoms, it is refreshing to hear how you are open to the next person doing something completely different, and how that can be a positive thing. I think we can really all learn from that. Any other questions at this stage? Cheryl.
Hi, Jan. I mean, Rian, thank you very much. That was very insightful. And I've got a number of students linked on board. I'm linked to the social ecology side. And what is the youngest group or child or person that you have caught that has been involved in the poaching, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, we've had, if I look at cattle, of course, with cattle and livestock arrests in the park, it's often, it's very young children. The Maasai, you know, the children look after the cattle, and they unfortunately then cross the boundary, come in. You get some at 6, 7 years old. That it's amazing to see, you know, 500 head of goats and sheep. That is the total wealth of that whole clan or families in the hands of 2 little kids who has to manage them through lions and hyenas and everything. Usually with the cattle and livestock, there's no arrest. They just look, you let them go. You don't do anything. We've had it a bit on poaching on the boundaries, where animal has been killed close to the boundary, where also family would come in and cut meat and go out. Again, we do not do anything with children. You hand them over to the parents that they go out. It is not, you just handle it. So luckily it does not happen a lot in Chad. We also had cattle coming in with youngsters who would look after it. There the parents had to pay a fine, but we never arrest any of the younger children that is involved there. With the snaring, we find a lot of camps with that desnaring program. We're not there to arrest. We're not there to look for poachers specifically. But if you find these snare lines, it leads to a camp. And in these camps, we often, as part of where they arrest the 10 or 12 people that's in that camp. And there you also get youngsters of 10, 20, 15 years old. But they goes to be prosecuted, and usually the youngsters are sent home. And it is the elders who are involved there who goes to court.
Yeah, because, sorry, Johan, can I ask another question?
Sure, go ahead.
Because from my studies, I have found that a number of grade 7s and grade 8s are involved in subsistence poaching. And when interviewing them and having a one-on-one and sitting down with them, because I also link that to environmental education, most of the children say their uncles and their dads send them in so that because they cannot be arrested, which is true. But then we need to find out some way of how to deal with the parents who have done this. And also what kind of programs would you implement for the homesteads? And would you kind of force that youngster to attend a program, an educational program, to try and enlighten them as to why they shouldn't be doing this? But then there's another aspect, sorry, there's a whole lot of things, because they're living below the breadline. So 63% of my households that I interviewed, lived off R1.46, R1.58 per person per day. And there's no ways they can survive on that. So they resort to doing poaching. And I just need to know where to from now. How would you deal with that? I don't know.
I mean, the authorities here are quite, if I can call it, quite slack on it. I mean, the cultural thing with the Maasai is that the children looks after the livestock. So there with the Maasai and livestock coming into protected areas, it's usually them, and it is so. They're much more, have sympathy for the children that comes in there. But if we catch them, you impound the cattle, and then it's the parents that has to come and pay. And if you follow what's happening in Ngorongoro now with the whole issue of that, a lot of the Maasai children is deprived from education, from proper development, because they used to do this field work. There's a big push from government and from social side that, if you look after cattle, these children should be in school. They should not look after cattle and sheep and, then be exposed to come into protected areas. We do have a lot of women and children that come in to cut grass, to cut poles, and in small harvesting of other plants and issues. That's a very difficult one because it doesn't do that much damage, but still you cross a boundary of the park and the law says you have to be arrested. And there is a whole education thing which the outreach program has, that they try and encourage these people not to come in. There's no fences, there's nothing here, so it's very easy to do it at night, but it's an ongoing thing. But government is very slack on that, if I can say. They will go rather for the big poachers, and they will fine a household for coming in and cut grass. But it is, as you say, a lot of these communities living, especially around the parks, it's very, very poor communities. And that argument and that question of there's a natural resource here, open one, a lot of grass, a lot of firewood, a lot of everything, and we sit just on the boundary and have no access to it. It's a question we can talk for hours about it, which I don't know. As we look there, the boundaries and the hard edges of parks are forming stronger and stronger, and we're now zipping the final lines in the sand of what is protected areas and what not. Unfortunately, those people should have had buffer zones, and the laws put buffer zones, but all those buffer zones already been encroached, and it's not well protected, so it's gone. Those buffer zones are gone. And yeah, you have sympathy and you try and do it. But I always say, and I show people, I fly them that hard boundary. Donors that comes in and says, we have to change the communities. You show them the boundary, you show them the agriculture from there going as far as the eye can see. And you ask them, from where to where must the park now take responsibility to try and help the communities? Is it 1 kilometer, 5 or 10? As far as I'm concerned, the whole country is a community that must benefit out of these areas. So you cannot highlight one group and says you can now benefit out of this community. And the budgets we have for community outreach is so small. If you have 1 million people around your boundary and you have $100,000, you don't make a difference with that community. You have to use it other ways. That's a win-win, that they do get employment, but they also help you, because usually those communities is what put pressure on that national park. Thank you.
Rian, thank you very much for that comprehensive answer. Cheryl unfortunately just messaged me. Her computer was forcing her to do an update and she had to fall out. I think she's going to try and re-enter the conversation. There's a comment in the chat from John Stewart. I'm just going to read that. Rian's point about project and protected area managers moving on periodically is very important. Whilst stability and continuity is important, they have to come about through building resilient programs and people, not just rely upon the presence of 1 or 2 charismatic individuals. This goes not just for African protected areas, it is a worldwide phenomenon. New ideas and new perspectives, openness and adaptability are crucial. Thanks for a terrific presentation, Rian.
Thank you.
So I think we all echo that last thought as well. Rian, while there are no questions in the chat or anybody putting up their hand, Cheryl, welcome back. I would like to ask, I saw that you lost staff in Zakuma. How do you handle that? What is the psychological process also for somebody who perhaps entered conservation and prepared to work more in a scientific way and in the scientific field, and now having to work also in sometimes paramilitary operations to protect those areas?
Yeah, it's very traumatic. Luckily it's only in these Western Congo. I know Garamba, they've lost many, Virunga. In Chad, Zakuma, we lost one very traumatic incident where a whole patrol of 6 was wiped out by Sudanese, machine gunned down when they were praying. It's a very traumatic experience, and it has a very big impact on your other staff. That happened quite in the beginning of that involvement in Zakuma. Just to go, and this was happened far outside the park. We couldn't get there. We only got there 3 days later. Rumors started to go around, and you must in Chad, most of the rangers have got 3 wives and a family of maybe 15 children that all rely on that ranger. So to me, the biggest, and which I never want to go through again, was to go from house to house and announce that that member has been shot and actually been killed, and confirmed all the rumors. Luckily, the partnership with the government was quite strong that time, and the government stood with us. A lot of smaller individuals tried to use it as a wedge between us and the government, and to say that we exposed people to the wrong elements and took them out of the park, all of that. Inside the Ranger Corps, it had a huge impact, that the element that was not fully with the PPP sort of went against us fully. It took us about 2 months to sort it out. And to look after the families. We learned there what you should do. There's all these children that you have that was dependent. What happened to them? They have their own ways. What I've learned there is just to go with a custom. Don't try and come with your clever stuff of we're going to pay the family every month the salary, all of that. The custom there has a way of how they do it, and you have to follow with that custom, even if you don't fully agree with it, and they helped us to sort it out. As I said there, what is amazing in places like Chad is that the children step forward. Many of the young rangers in Zakuma, they have lost their parents in fights with poachers. And it's a big tradition there to step forward and take your brother or your parents' place. And some of the best rangers we have there is ones that has lost parents already in that conflict. But it's a very difficult one to handle, especially those rangers we lost. Some of them were 50 years old. They were just a good ranger that protected a park. He was not a combat person. And after that, we also realized we have to train units. We had the same, like the Mamba units they talk, but we had reaction teams. The best guys, we put in a reaction team, and we gave them all the firepower, all the training, everything to react in times like this, that they can protect themselves, that they can able to, with all the training, do something. Also the thing that comes in here that you have to be very careful about is under these agreements is the human rights And if it comes to guns and killing poachers and killed by poachers, you got to be absolutely careful how you train and instruct your rangers to react, because it can be used very strongly against you today by so many organizations, so many with the unfortunate thing is these cell phones. People take pictures, they send it all over, and in the wrong context, it come back to you. And you as an organization, all these organizations, African Parks, Frankfurt Zoological Society, WWF, WCS, is absolutely aware today that your training have to be absolutely 100% on what they do in these situations. You are losing rangers, yes. If you want to go and see where people are really almost slaughtered, rangers, it's Virunga and Garamba, where it's military operations trying to protect those areas. And the way you react is in the spotlight all the time. So training and to know what to do in those situations are very important.
Thanks, Rian. I've also noticed that rangers never prefer to be law enforcement and as part of their work, but they never prefer to be in any military capacity. It's not what they sign up for. So we salute those who have to work in those situations because they don't have a choice, but it's never the choice that they want to be in there. I'm looking for any other questions. I see Peter Mills is in. Peter, any questions from you? Peter is from the Game Rangers Association of Africa. Thank you very much also for their contribution. I'm just looking in the chat if I see any questions there. I see a comment from, I think it's Babajide. Sorry, I couldn't join earlier due to poor network. In my own opinion, we are over-militarizing park protection in Africa. Can we work towards conservation education as a way out?
Yeah, I think it's again from place to place. Here in the Serengeti, as I said there, our operations here, there's only one person carrying a gun, and that's usually just to protect. Often there's a buffalo in a snare or whatever. It's not really to do with the operation they're in. All our other people we employ here, none of them carry any firearms. They just carry a stick and cutters. So the operation here in the Serengeti is completely not militarized. The same in Ngorongoro. It is nothing really. It's more monitoring, observing, watching where it happened. The incidences of contacts there is very little. The Garamba National Park in Congo is a complete military operation because the whole area has been so destabilized by the Lord's Resistance Army that no community can live in peace around. So they had to go, and the poaching there, the number of rangers they lost being shot by heavily armed poachers, they had to go that way. The reality today is that they have stabilized the whole area around the park, and thousands of communities can live in peace, can carry on with trading, traveling, because these units are now part of the communities. It's the same in Zakuma. The military units there are part of the community. It's almost the police unit in that community. It's their children, their family, that is the members there. And if you can reduce the firearms, and we did reduce it a lot in Zakuma and took the spotlight off military issues, it works the best. There's another very interesting operation by African Parks in Central African Republic, Chinko, which was an old hunting block that they stabilized, overrun by armed Sudanese from Sudan, cattle herders coming in. It's an area of about 2 million hectares that they're expanding now to 3 million hectares, beginning also very military type. Now they use helicopters still and everything, but they use local communities in bright yellow overalls that they drop, that interact with these herders, that stay with the herders for a couple of days, explain them why is this area protected, that shows them the boundaries, and slowly expanding together with these herders. They've taken it from military totally to a dialogue, and still using the same, techniques of deploying and camping of rangers, but they don't come in camouflage uniform, they come in a bright suit. And they are now known by the herders. If they see these people, they know we can interact with them. They're going to tell us we move out, you're not in the right place, but and they carry some medicine and some cattle medicine and give advice and so on, but they operate on a total different ways. And it's a whole case study that will be worthwhile to go and look at and make a full talk about that approach. But I fully agree, if you can get away from military and guns, it is the best way. In Tanzania, it's very low, the military side of it. In Chad, which is an unstable country where there's a lot of rebels and guns and stuff, it's a different situation. Congo as well, different.
Thanks, Rian. I'm just going to, Peter, you're unmuted. You're welcome to comment.
Hello, Johan.
Hi, welcome, Peter.
Yeah. Sorry, I was late. You were at college with my wife, Lorraine Dempers, then, and you're very good friends with Yaki Ackerman, if I remember correctly. So
yeah.
I've been following you around Africa, even though you don't know it. But just to make a comment about that you made earlier, Johan, about the ranger's job, and the ranger that doesn't really want to be involved in military issues, and that's completely true. The problem that we sit with at the moment is that, especially in South Africa, where certain parts, certain ranges in certain part of the country, and I'm going to mention where, and also the place that Rian just mentioned now, where paramilitary tactics are unavoidable. And that is unfortunately driving the image of the ranger towards this paramilitary image that we're getting a lot of flack from various organizations, NGOs from overseas. And the training is also geared towards that, especially in Southern Africa. You go to the training, reputable training institution, you find that there's a strong paramilitary content to it, and really deviating away from the actual ranger's job, which is a nice job, monitoring, doing work in conservation areas, management issues, and so on. So it's unfortunate that it's pushing us that way, but it is a specialized component of the ranger's job. But I think the rangers should be trained specifically in areas where it's necessary to operate like that. But unfortunately, that whole paramilitary idea permeates through the whole ranger force, and that's unfortunate. And we must actually consciously work against that. Rian was talking about the rangers in the community rangers, whatever you call them, in Ngorongoro and in Kenya and so on. That type of ranger work should be made more public so that people are sensitized to the fact that the rangers' work isn't military or paramilitary.
Yeah, if I can just make one comment there on training of rangers, and we've gone through it a lot, protecting, it comes down to the basics. in any life, it doesn't even have to be in a park. If you or your friend is wherever in a street and your life is threatened or your friend's life is threatened, you are allowed to react, to do something. If somebody wants to cut the person next to you with a panga, which is often happened, you're allowed to use a stick or a rock to counteract and to prevent that person from being killed. That's the basic. The important thing is you need to have a very good training to decide, this is a fisherman, he's not going to attack me, he's doing that. But if a person stand up, and that's the case in all these Sudanese bordered or in the Congo, if a guy with an AK, if you trap him in the park and he has an AK and he raises it, you will be shot, you will be killed. There's no doubt about it. So you have to train and arm that person to say, if you're in a field protecting this area or a community and somebody threatens your life or the person's next to your life, you are allowed to react. It's a very complicated thing that if that guy raised the AK-47 and want to shoot you, and before you react, he lower it, turn around and walk away, you can do nothing but to go him and try and persuade him he's arrested. You can then do nothing. But to make a split decision, this guy is going to shoot me or is going to shoot the guy next to me, you have to have the training and the equipment to protect yourself. And that's the basics of it all. That is why training and training and training is so important. We had the cases here in the Serengeti where we had rangers armed with a stick arresting a poacher that had a poisoned arrow, bow and arrow. He shot the ranger in the stomach, and that ranger died a terrible death. With a poisoned arrow in the stomach, couldn't get in time to the hospital, he died. He had nothing to protect himself. I feel it was the fault of the management there that he did not have the things to protect himself in that situation. I had, we always say fishermen, they not, you just arrest a fisherman very calmly and that's how we do it. But I had a case where a fisherman retaliated with a barbed spear that they use for the fish and went for the stomach of a ranger. Luckily missed it. But if that spear went in, that ranger would have been dead because he was 30 kilometers away from any help. So it is a responsibility of management to equip and train your rangers to be able to react to that threat that in that area. Is that threat is, as it happened in Zakuma, a trained military unit from the Sudanese army that come over to poach in your area, that's not going to hesitate to shoot down a patrol of 7 people when they're praying, then you have to arm, you have to train, you have to put that ranger in a position. It's a responsibility to that family with the 14 children that he can defend himself and do something. But it differs from place to place very much.
Yeah, I think if I may, Johan.
Go for it.
Yeah, I think that, you know, the scenarios you sketched now, it's very difficult for the ranger, and I think you did mention when I signed on, the rule of engagement for a military operation is very different to the rules of engagement for a ranger. But the ranger's job is essentially a policing job, a wildlife policing job. So he has to be trained in arrest procedures and in the appropriate and armed appropriately in the situation where it is. But it's not the same across Africa. There are a number of different scenarios across Africa, but people tend to regard the ranger's job as a ranger's job and it's all the same, and it's not. But sorry, a question to Rian. Rian, what do you think the standard of the training in the areas where you operate? What is the level of professionality in those areas?
I think here in Tanzania, because there's not, you know, we hardly ever see a firearm used in poaching incidents, except Sulu and down there a little bit. But here it's very low. It's the rangers are organized in a military fashion because of the, you know, units and the discipline. They get a basic training. They carry firearms that they give back every day. It's quite low in Tanzania because just there is not a big threat. It's more working with communities and just be able to carry a firearm, but they have no real big military threats or people coming in 2 or 3 firearms that threaten them. So the training here is quite low. We concentrate more on monitoring of the, especially rhinos, monitoring of the rhinos, having a presence there all the time, trying to find out calves, where they walk. That's the bigger thing. Our program with ex-poachers is to try and get that, that component of putting snares down to use, and there's no training there. You don't have to train an ex-poacher. He knows exactly what to do there. The contact they have with basically brothers and sisters when we arrest the camp, is there's a few blows here and there and chasing and catching. But by the time they're on the car, they're all big friends and they talk the same language. It's not always like that, but there's not a very big military or training component in Tanzania. As you go to these more countries in Congo and in Chad and Niger or up in Panjari, where they're up against, in Panjari, it's terrible, with landmines and all sorts of issues that's thrown against them. There, the training, Garamba, we brought in a top, when we were there, I'm taking African Parks, brought in a top military trainers to come and help the rangers there to come on a standard that they can just save themselves and stand up. So the training there is intense. It's week after week. And it depends. I know Virunga is the same thing. Zakuma is not. Zakuma didn't have a contact now for years. So the presence is there, but and the training to keep them to the standard. But it's more there that they integrated with the communities and help the communities, that there's stability with cattle raiding, with all those sort of things that happen inside there. But it's just you have to keep that training. Unfortunately, we rely on ex-military people to do the training, but there's more and more now that they have a syllabus which fits in with fitting in that you're a civilian and trying to keep law and order in an area or protect wildlife, and your approach is different. All the organizations I know of now is very sensitive about it and very look at it very critically, how they train, how they arm, and how they react in that position as a protector of wildlife that engage with a poacher in the wrong way.
Rian, thank you very much. It's really good to hear that many of these areas went from military war zones to stable areas. And that through the efforts of the conservationists. So that's a very positive side effect of conservation that came into these areas. I see some comments in the chat from Mashudu Makoka. We just to summarize his comment, we might need to think about conservation changing the poverty levels of the communities. And I think that is very much part of the whole where conservation is at the moment, is to accommodate and develop the communities. There's I know University of Stellenbosch that we are going to be working with this year, also on a series. They've got the African Wildlife Economies Unit, where they're specifically looking at how do you develop the economy through the protection of wildlife. And it's done differently in different countries. Rian, I don't know if you would like to comment on that.
Yeah, my whole big comment there is all about balance. If you've got 7 villages around the national park, like in Chinko, you can make a big difference to those 7 villages. If you have, like in the Serengeti, 2 million people that's below the poverty line living on your boundary, and you have a budget that you have to protect that national park, and you have a community outreach program, How are you going to change? If the World Food Program, if the government, if the health department, if the Department of Education cannot change those communities, how must the poor conservationists with these small budgets change that community from poverty to something bigger? Our whole desnaring program in the Serengeti is basically fully a community program, where we try and put money into the hands of community, where community have a chance to better the outlook of the park, which is providing jobs for millions of people in Tanzania. You know, Serengeti National Park generated before COVID $50 million out of tourism. That is just at the gate fees. We're not talking all the lodges, car drivers, mechanics, people in Arusha that benefit out of this park. So the nation benefit massively out of the Serengeti. The community just along the boundary, which is the problem community, which we have to engage because they sit with the problems of elephant and lion going into them, is a small part of the community that is in there. But our small budgets and the job provision, I've often been in a community here sitting and says, you don't give us jobs. You always says you're going to give jobs, but you don't give jobs. We do employ 2 or 3 people out of that village, but that is what you can do. Out of 2 million people, you don't make a dent with your community outreach program. We employ 40, 50 people, ex-poachers from the communities inside here, and it is all about working with them if they go back. We employ them for a year, then they go back in the community. We try and see that there's another livelihood for them, that they don't have to fall back into this horrible thing of lying in a park the whole night and killing animals. But it's difficult with a small budget. It's difficult to make such a big ship going into another direction. And as I say, there's organizations like the World Bank, the World Food Program, all of them that is trying to do the same thing with massive budgets. And it's not possible for us as a small park to achieve that.
Thanks, Rian. Peter, you've got another question?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to that and to Mashudu's question, and to just follow on from what Rian said. And there are moves, there are strategies to deal with not only protected areas, but greater areas outside of protected areas. And there are numerous, especially in Southern Africa, examples of that, where communities are actively given responsibility to manage their own resources, and the resources belong to them. I'll be talking about that in my talk next week. So about what new strategies there are and what is happening. But Rian is correct. The reserve can only do that much, but there is the move, and I'm sure Rian will agree that in those areas where there are 2 million people, the park is, or should be, and I'm sure they are actually contributing or working with the communities to try and solve problems. The same thing at the edge of the Kruger National Park. There are 2 million people on the edge of the Kruger National, western border in South Africa, the Kruger National Park. Those people are there directly or indirectly as a result of the Kruger National Park. The Kruger National Park creates an economic hub that generates other benefits that aren't necessarily just employment, but next to the park, there are spas and communities and stuff that depend on the tourism that come through the area. So the benefits from the Kruger aren't apparent to the local communities, but they are there. People just don't recognize it.
Yep. Peter, thank you very much. We've had Rian already now for more than 2.5 hours. We will put this whole talk on our YouTube channel, and it will be available free of charge to anybody who want to learn from it all over the African continent and beyond. So you're welcome to just pick that up there. Any other questions at this stage? If not, I'm going to thank Rian for the time spent. I just want to quickly refer to what Peter just referred to. He will be talking on unlocking nature next Thursday night. And so if you want to take up the issue of sustainability and conservation, he will be talking about exactly that. Peter is from the Game Rangers Association of Africa. So that's also why I asked him to comment and engage, because I knew he had quite a bit of, he's put a lot of thought into the issue of sustainability. Rian, once again, thank you very much. We learned a lot this morning, and thank you for sharing many lessons from your career of 36 years in nature conservation. Everybody else, thank you very much for attending, and we hope to see you again next week when we will be hosting Ian Stevenson from the Lower Zambezi Conservation Initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Good day.